Hey, thank you everyone, and we have a good group on right now. So my name's Katie Ochin. I work for Military Family Services. I'm here in the room with Vanessa Walsh and Teresa Roy. So they are also supporting the spousal employment team right now. So thank you so much for joining. We're really excited to combine this Work It Out session with the virtual career fair today. Just so everyone knows, like I said, today is this session is the first one. It will be followed at 11:30 by a panel discussion called Lessons from the Field. So we have 3 successful military spouses on a panel from across the country that are going to be presenting their career stories, but also there to answer some of your questions. And then today's session, we have resume career expert, Mark Franklin. Some of you might recognize Mark if you've participated in Your Career Path, which is our online virtual career counseling program. So Mark and his team run that program for us and have done a phenomenal job and are doing it again this year. And Mark's here to tell us a little bit about renovating your resume. And there's a lot of great information in here. Please note that the slides and the recording will be available to you after this session. And if you do want, as we mentioned before, the slides in French, please just send us a private message in the chat and we will send you those directly to your email. So we have all these slides in French today. And if you ever do have a French question throughout the session, please feel free to type it in the chat and we will be able to translate that for Mark and get the answer to you. Also, throughout the session, if you do have any questions, you should see, hopefully you've found it by now, but there's a little chat box. If you go to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the little chat icon. If you click on that, you're able to type messages over to us. So we encourage you throughout the entire session to type in questions. We have people here monitoring that, and we will bring those to Mark's attention at the appropriate times. We'll definitely have some time for questions at the end as well. So we are gonna get going now. I'm gonna pass things over to Mark, who is in Toronto, I believe right now, unless you're traveling, Mark.
Yeah, that's it, in Toronto, thanks.
Okay, excellent. So we're in Ottawa right now. Mark's in Toronto. I think we have people all across the country representing. So over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Katie and Vanessa and Eunice. Bonjour. Good morning. I'm looking forward to leading an effective session with the group today on renovating your resume. Telling your story. Telling your story is one thing that you do on your resume, so telling your story better. And ultimately, a resume is a tool, we call it a career tool, to help you get interviews. And I think that's what many want that resume to do. So I'm looking forward to leading an effective session this morning. As Katie said, I lead the team here at Career Cycle, so we're a career management social enterprise. We actually have associates across the country in English and French, working in English and French, and have been working with thousands of people to help them navigate a lifetime of change and transition, which I know many military spouses are dealing with lots of transition and change. And job search as well. And so we've been doing that for over 10 years. We've had thousands of clients. We use a narrative or story-based approach, hence improving your story. All the tools and things that I work with here at Career Cycles, I've also integrated into courses. I teach a career management course at the University of Toronto and for others. And have co-founded a company called One Life Tools, where we use a lot of these narrative tools across Canada and the US to help others in turn help their clients. And I bring career stories to the airwaves and to a podcast. I like inspiring listeners. So we have the Career Buzz radio show. It's actually broadcast in Toronto, but you can listen to it across Canada and worldwide. And it's a podcast too, so you can look up Career Buzz and listen to stories. We'd love to have a military spouse story on the radio show. I've had several military personnel on the show talking about their career stories and changes. So that's a bit about me and a little bit about this session today. So first off, I want it to be engaging, and you know, I use Zoom a lot, and I usually have everybody being able to be interactive. So I'm inviting you to make it interactive, and I'll monitor the chat questions. And I'm assured if you put your hand up, you can actually just speak up and ask questions. So I want it to be engaging, effective, so that you feel like you've really learned something, and worthwhile, so that it was a worthwhile expenditure of time hanging out today together on this Work It Out session. Point two, many people have resumes. My experience is most people have something, and maybe you've joined this, this session because you have something, but you want to get it better. You want it more effective. I like this word renovate, like we're taking something, you've got the bones of it, you've got the content, the jobs, the education. I find people just want to improve it. And we'll look at this on 3 levels: the format, like what can we say about the look and feel of it, the organization of the sections, how well is it organized strategically for what you want, and then of course the content. You probably have many questions and challenges, and I've been really grateful to work with Military Family Services to lead the program for your career path. And so we've heard a number of these challenges. Partway through the session, I will highlight some that I've heard of, and we'll invite you to respond and react to that and see what challenges you have and see if we can respond and answer questions. We'll look at application methods. Many people wonder about that, and mostly people are responding to postings or looking at opportunities and sending their resumes by email. But sometimes it's not email, sometimes it's ATS or applicant tracking systems. I bet you've seen these systems that some bigger employers use. And then there's walk-in methods, and there's others. So let's consider that. And overall, to increase your hope and confidence when it comes to career and job search, be able to tell your story better to prospective employers and ultimately get more interviews. So, so how does that sound? It's hard to, usually I have all the little thumbnails in front of me, so I'm not seeing you right now, so I'm just going on faith that you're nodding your heads up and down and said, yeah, that's okay. But it would be helpful if somebody typed in something and just said, yeah, that sounds okay to me. Okay, so let's start by having you think about the problems, right? I find in resume workshops, it's useful to start thinking about the problems and where people are at before we get started. So I'm going to present a couple of pieces of what I'll call a substandard resume, something that definitely can use some improvement. So in the next slide, don't take that as an example of something that's great. Take it as an example of something that's substandard. But let's look at it with a critical eye. Maybe there's some things you like about it. Maybe there's some things that you would change and why. Okay, thanks. A few people gave me a thumbs up. I appreciate that. So let me just kind of say a few things out loud, and if people have reactions to this, maybe I'll throw out some open-ended questions, and feel free to either raise your hand and jump in with a comment or question, or type that into the chat. So we'll look at two pieces of it, and I'm going in a little blind, I know, by just saying let's critique this substandard resume for, say, a customer representative position at an IT company. So I'm just giving you this blind, but let's say, you have your name up top and you have 3 lines of contact info here. And, there's this kind of funny objective statement that you see. I hope I can find my ideal job in the field of IT. I'm interested in working in banking. There's this kind of summary with some generic kinds of transferable skills, communication, organization. What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? What would you change about this? So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. If you can see things, would you change that objective statement? Do you have an objective statement? Would you put something different in that summary? Would you even have a summary? Yeah, Joanne, thank you. Objective is vague. I kind of agree with that. Objective could be a bit longer or a bit more focused, right? Cater it to the job you're applying for. Whoever said that, thank you for that, because of course, what is this for exactly? What are the skills that they want? So I think that point, MFRC_010, thank you for that. Renee Cloud, the summary is not very personal. Yeah, exactly. It's got no numbers in it. Make it a professional profile. Megan, thanks for that. I like that. You're going to see, I'm going to throw something up in a sec for us to reconsider. I've tried to answer some of these problems here, and just, to give you a couple of quick ideas. So let's rethink this kind of top half of the resume over here. And let's have another look. So, you know, I would propose that you don't waste 3 lines on your contact info, and instead, you know, go with it all on 1 line if you can squeeze it in. And instead of an objective and a summary, I find those are often very lame to begin with. And if you're going to do it, here's a little trick. What if you were to say profile for the position of X, and you fill in the X? It's a tiny bit of customization for each resume that you send. And the moment you put in the employer's job title, like customer representative or whatever it happens to be, you're signaling to them in the first second that you've actually bothered to read their posting and you're going to respond to it. And then you pick not 4 or 5, but maybe 3 better bullet points. You know, notice that we've now here given 5 years of proven customer service experience, not just years, like quantify it. And notice the second bullet point, we're actually pointing to 2 jobs that the employer could see in the resume. So if we say experienced and willing to assist customers, etc., where would the employer find evidence of that? Oh, well, if they go down the resume, they're going to see the ABC college thing and the XYZ Military Family Resource Center job that I had when I was in Cold Lake, Alberta, or wherever. So here's, you know, a couple of things for you to think about right off the top. And I'm even saying that profile, leave it out if it's going to be generic. Like, I think all of us looking at that summary that was so generic and some of the comments that were made isn't really good enough. It's got a lot of, you know, super generic things. I'd rather have you go straight into experience rather than have a summary that is this vague. But if you're going to do it, here's a thing to think about, right? So let's do it one more time. Okay, so I'm going to throw up now one element from a component of the experience section. And let's critique this. And again, I'm going to suggest this is the substandard thing. And, you know, give me your quick reactions on this. You know, the setup here, it's on 2 lines. So notice that. The bullet points don't quite line up with the thing above. We've got 5 bullet points here. Conducted a variety of administrative duties. First bullet point that the reader gets. Gee, I wonder what kind of duties. How many? Well, you know, answered help deck, that's a little better, but, you know, how many calls does that? Is that like 1 a week or is it 100 a day? You know, so what do you think about this? What comments do you have about this little element, right? This is an experience element. These are kind of the building blocks of your resume. What do we like about this? What don't we like? Sarah says it's both past and present tense. Yeah, if it's in the past, it says it's finished in 2017, right? So it's done. So let's tell the employer this happened in the past. So we use a consistent tense. Melanie, define variety, right on. Like, I think variety is not a helpful word. I would like to see something specific here. Give me the administrative duties so that I could see it, and let's see if it matches the job that I posted for, right? Maybe list the admin duties exactly, Joanne. Isabel, should the position title be first? I agree, Isabel. I like to see that first, you know, but consistency I think is more important. You know, so when your resume has like 5 or 6 experiences, let's have a consistent approach. Why not put the customer service assistant thing first, comma, ABC college, and then the date? And why not use that setup line all on 1 line instead of wasting on 2 lines? So I agree with a bunch of things that were said. So thanks for your comments, and I invite more, and put your hands up if you want to just jump in. So let's have another look. Here's some things for you to think about. The setup line, notice here, we've got it all on 1 line, right? My marker is showing up on a different place. So let's see if we can save space and get the whole thing, the position first, comma, the name of the organization, and then the place, and then the date. You can do that all in 1 line. Now look at the bullet points are lined up nicely under the name, under the customer service word. And then look at what we've got here. Here's something for you to consider. Is this idea of results and having a results statement right there in the bullet points. Because, you know, we can talk about what we did in transferable skills, but we can also say, because of what I did, there were these results. And if you have this word results show up 2 or 3 or 4 times in your resume, you signal to the employer like you're a results-oriented person. That's people like that. So here we now have, let's go back to the bullet points that we're seeing, right? We have 50 plus students a day. Well, that's better than one a week. Everybody knows that people overstate things on their resumes. So if you just said help desk, you know, what does that mean? It probably means 1 or 2 a week, but 50 a day, holy smokes, that person is organized, right? What did we get? We got specific admin duties here. Isn't that helpful? Scheduling, data entry, report creation. What else? Oh, we entered 100 things in a day. You know, earned employee of the month. There's a result. Manager wrote a LinkedIn recommendation. That's an interesting result. So here's a few things for you to think about as we continue on. And I like people to think about the problems before we jump into the solutions. So thanks for playing along with me, and I'm open to any reactions that you have for these pieces, but we'll go ahead. And ultimately, I think you are all capable people. You will be able to renovate your resume based on some of the things and ideas that we're going to touch on as we go through here. So feel free to borrow and steal all of these ideas. In particular, this results thing, I found people really like this and get good results. They get interviews when they have this results focus. So a couple of things for you to think about. What are all these elements of a job search, right? And you know, I'm only going to talk about resume, CV, and cover letter because we're going to have a separate work it out session for LinkedIn and another one for job interviews. And all of those are your career tools. But at least, you know, the resume, you know, is generally a concise 1 or 2 page summary. It's much more skills oriented, accomplishments. It can be not just paid, but also unpaid. So don't lose the volunteer and unpaid experiences, and don't lose the education and professional development. You know, can you crack the 1-page resume problem? You know, it shows that you're a good kind of organizer if you can get it to 1 page. 2 in Canada seems pretty good. CV, you know, unfortunately, people sometimes use the term CV or curriculum vitae interchangeably. And I think that's unhelpful. And for those of you who might have advanced degrees, master's and PhD, and you might be looking for jobs in research or in academic institutions, those CVs are much more scholarly, right? So they're for applications to those colleges and universities and research institutes. And they would be set up differently, and they always have the education top or near the top, formally in reverse chronological order. They often have research and teaching interests. They break up your experience into research experience, teaching experience, and administrative experience, and it's a bit of a different thing. So I'm going to stick with the word resume, but just know when an employer sometimes asks for a CV, they often don't mean it. They actually mean a resume, not a CV, which is confusing. So there's a key distinction for us to think about, and just, you know, don't get confused if it's a job and not a research job, and they say send in your CV, they probably mean resume. It's just that people are a bit sloppy with that. The cover letter, you know, I was at a conference just last week, and one of the recruiters said, you know, don't send us a cover letter, we never read it. So that's one employer. I say follow the rules, follow the guidelines, follow the request. If the employer said send a cover letter, send a cover letter. If the employer didn't say it and they just said send their resume, well, okay, send the resume, and you might put a little blurb in the body of the email that you attached, but you may not necessarily need the whole cover letter. But it is a really great tool to explain why they might be interested in considering you. And I think especially as a military spouse, you may have some things that you want to explain. Maybe there's gaps in your resume. Maybe, you know, you've moved around from Nova Scotia to Alberta, you know, to Florida, and you know, that's a bit of a story to tell, and you want the employer to understand that. So you do have a chance to do that in the cover letter. So I'm not saying don't do it, but I think it's useful to consider where and when. And if you are going to do it, you know, let's name the skills that they want, and let's provide the concrete examples that get that. So let me know if that makes sense and if you have any questions on that. But what I'd like to do is now jump into thinking about getting that resume to work for you and to get that interview. And I think most of you are on the session because you want to get those interviews. So what about that? Well, you know, if you're going to go through the front door of recruiting, and I use that metaphorically, but the front door is, you know, there was a job posting and you applied. You don't have to find jobs that way, and many find jobs through the side door where there is less competition and there's interesting strategic ways to do that. Join us at the job search work it out session, and we're going to talk about that. But I know most people still use, you know, the front door, where you will find job postings and they say respond either through our applicant tracking system, like Taleo. There are others, right? But I'm pretty sure most of you have seen these things. You know, they're software applications that lots of employers use. Or they just say, send us your resume in attachment to this email. You know, it's kind of like a funnel though. And if 100 people applied and they're looking for 1 or 2 people, you get filtered out. And it's painful. And, you know, unfortunately, many are not good at getting back to you. So it feels a lot like you're putting a lot of energy out there and you're not getting a lot back. I call it the black hole of job search. You know, like black holes in space, you know, they absorb all heat and light and they don't let anything out. And that can be discouraging. So I'm gonna, in the job search work it out session, really encourage you to think about alternative ways. But if you do apply, you want to get through, and you want to get through and thinking about that human resource person who's usually in charge of that recruitment funnel. And look at this little ratio here, and let's just think about these numbers, right? And I want to give you a sense of what I mean by this, right? Imagine 100 opportunities that you chased after, and that out of those you got 0 job interviews, and therefore you got 0 job offers, right? So opportunities to interviews to offers. How does that person feel? That 100 to 0 person. Yeah, right? Not so good. How long did that take? Maybe that took 2 to 3 months to compile those 100. So discouraged, frustrated, what else? You know, unfortunately, it is a story that we hear a lot in our team, and not just 100 to 0, but I've heard 200 and 300 to 0, and that isn't good. What I'd prefer your story to be is 15 good opportunities that I found either online or through my network. Wow, I got 5 job interviews, and 2 of those interviews resulted in an offer, 2 job offers, and I get to choose. So how does that person feel? I would say that person probably feels better. You know, amazing, thank you. Be that second person, okay? Do yourself, do our, you know, be that second person. And I just think there are ways to be the first person that aren't helpful, and there are ways to be the second person. You know, you save time, but mostly I think you save frustration, you save emotional turmoil. You know, I've just seen too many of these stories, and getting through, right? Because a lot of what the resume is about is getting through, following up with that friendly human resources person, if that's who's looking after things. You know, there are real people on the other side of those gigantic applicant tracking systems. You can talk to people. Thank you, amazing, motivated, says Isabella. Isabel, thank you. Megan, great. Yeah, exactly, be that person. So how do you be that person? Let's renovate your resume in these five easy ways. Be that person by understanding that employer's needs and preferences. Probably the single most important thing that's a big fail for so many people that I see. I can't believe it. Then, once we thoroughly understand what that employer wants and needs and says they want, then and only then, let's not start with our resume, right? Client gives me a resume, I say, put the resume aside, let's look at what employer wants, right? If there's a specific posting, let's look at 5 typical postings for stuff you're looking for. Let's analyze that. Then let's go to steps 2, 3, and 4. Let's have a quick look at the format of your resume. Is it nice and presentable? Let's look at the organization of those sections. Does it make sense? And then finally, you know, let's jump into the content, because the content, of course, is at the lowest level of detail. It is where the rubber hits the road. But let's get organized. Let's do the big things and the overview things first. And then, you know what, get some feedback. It's hard to catch your own mistakes. Show somebody who's good, you know, who's particularly good with grammar and spelling, and it's just so hard to catch your own mistakes. Okay, let's jump in. Step number 1, research. Well, great. What do they want? So why is it that people miss this all the time? I can't quite figure it out. People send these generic resumes and they're not looking at least carefully enough at the posting or the position. If the posting is there and you have a posting and you want to apply for it through the front door of recruiting, you best are to, I usually copy and paste it into a Word document, and I use a little highlighter thing in Word, and I highlight all the keywords. What do they want, right? Like, it's just the easiest thing. And let's face it, these days, if you're suffering with an applicant tracking system, the thing is mostly looking for keywords. So give them what they want. If there are 10 keywords and you can weave them in strategically in your resume, give them that, and you're going to way improve your chances of getting an interview. So number one. Number two, you know, it's not just the posting. Let's have a little look at the company. What do they say about themselves? What's their tagline? What does their homepage say? What's going on in their industry? And if there's anything to learn about, you know, that IT thing that you're interested in, or oil and gas because you're in Alberta and things are changing there, or, you know, like what's going on that's helpful. And here there's lots of labor market information. It's a little boring, I know, but jobbank.gc.ca provides some decent content there for labor market information across Canada, and you can see what's going on in your region. So, you know, like, I'm not saying do a ton of work, okay, you don't have to spend hours on this, but even like, I don't know, 10 minutes looking at some of this stuff before you put your energy into the resume. I just want to go back to that ratio. You know, the 10 minutes here is worth the heartache of the 100 resumes that you sent out over the course of a month or two, because it brings you down, and maybe it weeds out some of those opportunities. You don't even want to go after them after you've done some further research. So, you know, have a look. You can look at the posting, you can look online, you can set up Google alerts to tell you about jobs. Glassdoor, I don't know if you've looked at that. You know, these days with reviews, lots of people review the employer, and you can see if this is a good employer or not. Your own network of contacts through LinkedIn, through the military family services, alumni, not just college and university alumni, which sometimes people can tap into, but also corporate alumni. Some companies are now getting into that. Yeah, exactly, Rene Cloud. It's important to make sure that the employer is a good fit for you. Right. You know, take them out if you out of possibility if that's not the thing. So let's just dive into this step one a tiny bit deeper, okay? I'm gonna go onto one posting. I dug this thing up like last week when I was playing around with this. You know, and I just wanna look at it with you because sometimes people don't do this. So I picked a place, you know, Cold Lake, Alberta. I picked one place that I know some military spouses are. I found this job on Indeed, market research interviewer for $22 an hour. You know, and I'm not saying this is a good job or a bad job. The job was real as of a week. It might still be there. If you're listening in from Cold Lake, Alberta, hey, maybe it's something for you, maybe it's not. So what do they say? This is actually, you know, their thing. So conduct customer satisfaction surveys. There's an interesting keyword. Approach customers. So let's just see here. Approaching customers means we're going to need some communication skills. Any experience with the word customers might be nice. We're looking for somebody responsible. That's a good word. Reliable, dependable. Those are three good words that I'd like to see. We've got friendly over here, personable, approachable, mature. That's a nice thing, interesting. You know, this is a really kind of simple job posting, but there's keywords here. And if you were applying for this job, I'd love to see these words somewhere in your resume. Surveys, maybe you did something on SurveyMonkey. You know, customers, you interacted with customers somewhere. Reliable, dependable, like give them 5 words and you're gonna up your chances of getting interviewed for this. So anyways, if you like that job, indeed.ca, it's one of those job boards that I know lots of people are using. Yeah. Give me questions if you have this. You know, if you've done some of that, like if you've spent some time analyzing these postings, you know, do you take your little highlighter out and highlight stuff? Do you try this, sprinkling those words across your resume bullet points? So this is part of the research, and for sure, I'm always keen on looking at a range. I'll say, give me 3 postings that are similar for the kinds of things you're looking for, whatever it is, whether it's something more simple like this market research, or, I know some of you, from what I learned last time, have all kinds of interesting educational backgrounds with advanced degrees in, microbiology or engineering. I mean, people have all kinds of backgrounds, and you might have really sophisticated job postings, and still, this is a useful task for you to do. Okay, number 2, let's think about the format, right? And I say format first because it's a kind of first impression thing, and it's easy for you if you have your resume handy right beside you. I want you to go and do this and think about this with your own resume as we go through these next couple of points, right? Because point 2, after we do the research, we're going to look at the resume, format, organization, content. So, format. Couple of things for you to think about. Sorry for a lot of points here, but I just want to kind of get through it and then invite your questions on this, if you do have questions. Oh, and Shannon, thanks for the question. Do you suggest customizing resume for each job posting? I don't want to have you do a gigantic make work project, but if I could just go back, and I think you're not the only one, Shannon, to ask that question. I'm going to jump back a bunch of slides here for a sec, and I'm just going to go to this little thing here. See this profile for the position of, right? This is so easy. I think in under 5 minutes, I could say you could change a few things, and this is one of them, right? Let's say you had a database of maybe 10 bullet points, and that each time you found a job, you put profile for the position of X, you fill in the X, and then you pick 3 of those 10 points that seem relevant, or you tweak them and give the employer the language. Wow, you've just upped your chances of getting interviews a lot. So, I'm not saying change, change your education, change your work experience. No, I'm not kind of trying to make too much work for you, but yeah, let's get focused on that. A couple of points to think about, and I'll just go through them quickly, and you have questions on any of these, then we can just jump in, but any resume thing ought to talk about this. If you can solve the 1-page resume problem, it shows that you're kind of concise and organized, but 2 pages is fine. Make sure you have your contact info. I think if you can get it all on 1 line, you're in better shape than on 2 or 3 lines and wasting all of that. If people print out your resume and page 2 gets orphaned from page 1, then you should have your name and phone number and page 2 up on the top right. I see dates kind of all over the place. If you've got, 2015 to 2017, let's get the dates all aligned. I don't care if it's on the right or the left, but let's not have it ragged, and let's not have it, on the left for experience, but on the right for education. That looks messy and inconsistent. Margins, let's make it easy to read, 2 centimeters or so all the way around. Font size, I sometimes see it's too big, it's too little. Arial and Helvetica, you can get away with 10, but probably 11. Times New Roman looks too small at 10. Font, sometimes I see like people have 3 fonts and 4 fonts. Can we just stick with 1 font to make it easy? And graphics, like applicant tracking systems don't care about those fancy underlines and colors and things, right? They just gobble up resumes, and it's not helpful to have too many graphics. If you're trying for, you're gonna put your resume in a pizza box and send it to the employer, guerrilla tactics like that, then maybe it looks really special, and maybe you're in a creative industry like graphic design or marketing, digital marketing, and then maybe you want to make it look kind of special. But I find mostly resumes are so poorly done that any employer is grateful for a simple, well-formatted, well-organized, good content. Like, get that right and forget all the extra fancy stuff. So I'm open to your comments on that. Joanne, do you need your full address? I'm finding more and more people are not, and I know you're moving around a lot, or you just moved from here to there, and you're planning a career change or a job search, and you're in place 1 and you're going to go to place 2. I find more and more people are not, it's a private thing. Email address and phone number are pretty important. So, I'm finding people aren't. It's a privacy thing. Resumes are all out there. You know, do you want to, sometimes people upload the resume to LinkedIn or to Indeed. And, you know, I'm finding especially women don't want to do that. They don't want to have that information available. So I'm finding more and more people are taking it off. So what about the link to your LinkedIn? Good question, MFRC_010. If you are proud of it, you know, I didn't include it yet. For sure, almost all employers say they're going to go from your resume. And if they like you, you know, if you get into the A pile and not the B pile, then they're going to go to your LinkedIn profile anyways. So you might as well. But if you're not fully proud of it yet, hold and join our LinkedIn thing, because we're going to do a work it out session on LinkedIn. So, but I do find that that's a really helpful thing anyways, but they'll find you, they'll Google you, and they'll find you. It's the first thing that's going to come up almost for everybody. A couple of other things to think about for format, and then I want to move on. The setup line. So what I mean by setup line is this first line here, you know, the line where you say the position was, the company was, the place was, and the year was. If you can get away with it all on one line, great, do it all in one line. I like these explainer lines, you know, if it's somebody, you know, if you worked for the Canadian military, or if you worked for, you know, RBC, everybody kind of knows what those are, but, you know, 90% of Canadians work for small to medium-sized enterprises, and most employers don't know what that is, you know, so give them a one-liner and help them understand it. And then let's go into the bullet points. And again, notice the strategy I'm going to encourage you to do is 3 or 4 or whatever bullet points on those skills, transferable skills. And if you can bring yourself to do it, one results point with some numbers are really nice. And then bullets, most people do like bullets, you know, instead of a block of text. So I'm gonna suggest you do that. It's easier to digest that. Okay. So what about the organization of the sections, right? So we've talked about research, we've talked about format. Now, strategically organize your sections. Here's the sections that many people have, kind of in order. And if you have questions, let me know via chat or raise your hand. What about, let's see, oh, there are some questions here in the Q&A thing. I just found that out. Great, thanks for that. I'm going to come back to some of those questions, so keep them coming. Name and contact, right? Here's that LinkedIn. Somebody asked about that LinkedIn before, so, you know, I'm suggesting, yeah, you could do that. No pictures, right? Canadian resumes. I know some of you might be joining from Europe now, and I know in Europe they have different strategies, but mostly in Canada we don't have pictures or marital status. Optional profile for the position of, we talked about that. You may have 2 experience sections, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute. A relevant experience section separated from an additional experience section, and that solves a problem for many people. Volunteer and community experience are quite relevant. In some cases, it's so relevant you might want to fold these 2 into one section, these 2. Education and PD. I'm finding that people can do this. You might have your degree or degrees or diplomas first, and then the PD second. Optional sections, I find people add technical and language skills, sometimes together. You know, that's helpful. Awards, professional memberships or affiliations. Here's that thing that people used to do, like activities and interests. You know, I find it kind of lame if you just say, oh, interest in travel or reading. You know, give them something. Travel, you know, recently did a 3-week pedal-powered trip to Ireland or something. You know, give them something that's a little more, like, what did you read? If you're interested in reading, what did you read recently? What sort of relevant book titles might actually help you get an interview? So those are a couple of thoughts in organization of sections. Let's just see. At times, an employer may encourage military spouses to identify as a military spouse in their cover letters. Yeah, we talked about cover letters, and it is true, right? And I'm thinking that's one of the solutions as a military spouse that you may have to explain to employers what's going on. If they didn't request, you know, if they didn't request the cover letter, you know, and I'm hearing some employers kind of annoyed. If we didn't ask for the cover letter, why did you send us one? It's not fair, but some of them do that. So, there in the body of your email, if you attach the application, you could do it there. One quick word on organization of sections. Chronological, this is just the experience section, is in like reverse chronological order. That's typically what people do. I think something for many of you to think about is this number 2, modified chronological, where you have 2 sections to organize your experience. And here you could say, this is my relevant experience, maybe it's relevant research experience, and have it in reverse chronological order. And then a second section called additional experience, have that in reverse chronological order. And what that helps you do, if your most relevant experience was something that you did 2 or 3 jobs ago, it helps you bring that right up to the top. I find that is just super helpful. Number 2, functional resume is where you say, here's my broad skill sets, and then you put some bullet points in, and then you use a simple experience list below. I find that employers simply don't like it. They don't like it. I rarely tell somebody that this is an advisable thing to do. Employers say it's hard to connect the dots from the skills to the positions. So content, right? Let's now just talk about this. A couple of things for you to think about. What does the employer need? They say excellent communication skills. What do you have that relates to the thing that they said? You've done some explaining, you've done active listening, and then convert that into a good bullet that brings those skills to meet the needs with some customization for you. Explained drug interaction and side effects to 20 patients per day. Actively listen to questions, reducing complaints. Wow, okay. That sounds like good communication skills. I'd rather see this bullet point than some generic point on the top of your resume that says excellent communication skills. Try this. Take the verb, explained or listened or whatever, the what you did and the result or impact all in one little bullet point. Reorganize the filing system, what I did, for 1,000+ tax documents. So there's the verb and the what I did, saving time for staff. It would be nice if I could say saving 20%. So that's a couple of things to think about just to structure each of those bullet points. This is where the rubber hits the road. Write those bullet points in first person, but don't use I or my, right? Like, look at back there. I don't say I reorganize the filing system. It's kind of like the pronoun is taken for granted. Use past tense if it's in the past, present for current. Again, if I want to emphasize one point and one point only in today's session, use employers' keywords. You will get more interviews. Let's try and be creative with the verbs that you use. There's a zillion sites that list these things, right? Here I brought up 1 or 2. Let's just see if I jump over to that Muse. I like the Muse. It's a US thing, but they have really helpful advice. And they have, there's a zillion of these things on the internet. So you led, well, you chaired, you controlled, you coordinated, you executed, you headed it up, you operated. So there's a lot of those great words there, and quantify where possible, right? Remember we saw this earlier, 50+, what you did. Yeah, and Vanessa, thanks for your point there about whether you do or don't say that you're a military spouse. It's true, and there's biases here, so I'd encourage everybody to look at that little note in the chat, which I'm just looking at. Yeah, because look, there is a network of employers who really are connected and I believe are very welcoming of military spouse applications, and that would be an advantage, right? So I think it's a bigger question to think about there, but thanks, Vanessa, for your points on that. Okay, so that was step 4, right? And let's face it, this is really important, and in a short webinar, we don't have so much time to go through it, but I feel like, you, with a couple of examples that we're looking at here, will be able to renovate your resume using some of the ideas that we've got so that each experience is solid. And when you have that, you've got a really good customized resume, at least for a range of jobs, and then have somebody have a look at it, draft it up, get some feedback. You could try this, Tell somebody that you know about the ideal candidate from your research, right? For this kind of job, here's what these employers say they want. Write it down or give them 5 points. Let them have a look at your resume and then say, hey, how well am I representing myself? So that'll help not only catch those little spelling mistakes, but also it'll help to see if you've positioned yourself right. So, okay, let's carry on. I'm going to save some time for questions, which I know there's a couple in the open questions here. And there was one question about the slides, and I believe, yes, in French and English, you'll have access to the slides. Okay, so a couple of things of do's and don'ts, right? And this is more summary than anything else. Tailoring. Do you have to rewrite your resume for every position? No, but you can most certainly do a couple of minutes of tailoring and increase the likelihood of getting that interview. Number two, I think this is a fail that I see so often, is just poor bullet points that don't provide examples or numbers, right? Wherever possible, show numbers. It's usually easy to do, and if you can't remember if it was 40 a day that I spoke to, 40 customers a day or 50 customers a day, lowball it and put a little plus sign. Like, you never want to get caught in a job interview, you know, where somebody says, well, what about that 50? And you don't have a story to explain what that number is. So better to go low and put a plus sign and be able to confidently talk about whatever you wrote in that resume. Anything is fair game for an interview. And then keep it tight, right? 1 page if you can do it, 2 pages if you can't, and off you go. So here we go. Look at point 1. Oh my goodness, how many times have I seen spelling mistakes on resumes? I don't know. Some employers say they have a limited amount of tolerance. Look, we're in Canada, everybody, and you know, where I am, there's less than half the people have English as a first language. It's not easy. English is and French too, they're not easy languages to spell. So some employers maybe have a bit of patience for that, but not much, I'll tell you. And 1 or 2 spelling mistakes, and your gorgeous resume that you killed yourself for is gone. You know, it's in the not interview pile. Same with grammar mistakes. Research says that people fake big things, not just small things, but big things. People say that there's research that says that a big fraction of people fake a degree or a diploma, fake a job. So don't do that. You know, you get caught in an inaccuracy like that, and it's grounds for immediate dismissal if that gets found. Too long, you know what? I've seen people with 20 years experience in senior positions do a 1-page resume. Like, so can you. Inconsistent formatting, we talked a bit about that. Leaving out experiences that show skills. If I could come back to one question that I see in the questions. So Megan, you ask, what kind of resume do you suggest if you don't have a lot of work experience? You know, employers are interested in your experience and volunteer experience and travel experience can be relevant experiences that you can include in your resume that shows skills. So it doesn't all have to be paid experience. College and university gave many of you, not all of you, but those who had experiences there, you had projects. And I find that's another fail. People don't put the projects from college or university as an experience. Employers are interested in those skills, so give them that. And number 7, red flags. You know, like, what are those red flags? And now we're going to come to the typical problems in a moment. That might be red flags. You know, you just don't want to leave a red flag like a problem question, like why did she leave out that 5-year block here? Like, let's try and figure out how we can tell them about those 5 years. And at the bottom of resumes, you know, you see references available upon request. I mean, they're always available upon request. You don't need to include that. That's sort of understood. So, okay, I'm just concerned about time here, and I'll go a bit here on application methods and then typical challenges, and then we'll kind of come back to questions and conversation. So mostly I find if you're applying to posted jobs, that employer wants you to attach their resume to an email. So look, you may have your resume on your computer just with the word resume, but guess what? A lot of people do too. So can you put your name in the file name, right? Using PDF is better than Word if you can do it, because then it's more solid. Cover letter can be all in one file with your resume, or you might copy and paste a bit of content from it into the body of the email. And a subject line that's super clear so that they know. Give them the job title, give them the job number if there's a number, fill your last name in there so they can see in the email. Applicant tracking system, try and get through the funnel, try and say yes as much as possible, and I know that's a whole bunch of questions right there because it's a big filter system. And sometimes you get to attach your resume to those things, and sometimes you just have to copy and paste, which is a hassle. Many are applying through LinkedIn or Indeed. And so just know that, especially on LinkedIn, right, you don't have to use your profile as the application, right? You can actually attach, for most positions anyways, you can attach your resume. Because that's the thing about LinkedIn, right? One size fits all. You've got one LinkedIn profile for all things, but resumes you can customize. What about walking in? Like, walking in is a nice thing for certain opportunities, and I've heard some really fabulous stories of people walking in, meeting that person right then and there. Sometimes there's a reception, speaking nicely to them, talking, I saw the opportunity here, I did bring my resume. Maybe here you have something that's more of a generic objective because it's hard to predict exactly who you're walking into, but typically no letter. And more about networking in the job search work it out session, where we're going to talk about side door opportunities. And this is a whole other way that you use your resume, where instead of the job posting leading and your resume follows, right? What if you lead and then, the resume is sort of your calling card afterwards. So there's lots of ideas about that. Okay, so gaps in employment, I think, is probably one of the number one things that we've heard about a typical challenge that you've had. And, in some ways you can explain things either in a cover letter or in that profile for the position of, and even putting a travel period and explaining it and saying what you got out of the travel, right? Developed cross-cultural communication skills, flexibility, adaptability, right? Travel and adapting to a new environment are wonderful skills that employers would like. You can also, like childcare too. I mean, people understand that we're humans and we have children. And so that also can explain parental time. In 2 words can explain some years. If the gap in employment is now, and your last job was in 2016, it's super nice to get something on your resume. And wouldn't it be good to volunteer somehow, some way, check the volunteer opportunities in your area? That's a good one. The lack of experience, I think mostly people think I don't have paid experience, so I want you to focus on volunteer experience also. International experience is valuable. We're here, we speak to so many people with international experience. It is nice to have some Canadian experience to balance. You might even have Canadian experience as one section and international experience as that additional section in the modified chronological resume that I mentioned earlier. The mismatch I think people worry about more than the employer, but it is a reality for some. And so again, I would encourage you to draw some experiences from your education and set them up as experiences, right? That research project, that essay that you wrote, and it would show experience then in your field. And I know I work with PhDs and master's students, and they say, should I take my advanced degree off my resume? And it hurts me to hear those questions because I know how hard it is to earn those diplomas and degrees. So I think the focus needs to be skills, and don't, you can put your education further down and focus on the employer skills higher up. So I know there's a lot of questions on these things. Let's see, seems like applying on Indeed leads to a black hole of nothing. I know, that's why I'm going to suggest job searching via other ways. I can tell you, at One Life Tools, we posted a job a little while ago and we got too many applications, but guess what? We did interview 6 or 7 of those people and we did hire somebody. But it was one, and so your chances are much lower because everybody can see those postings. So yeah, okay, Renee Claude, thanks for that. I do, we don't have time for that, but I think you get the idea that modified chronological is a really helpful approach, right? And so I hope you can take that. So let me pull it together here and can answer questions afterwards, but what can you do next? Find relevant postings. Right? Underline, highlight their keywords, schedule yourself a deadline, right? Make it happen. Do it by November 30th. Renovate your resume. Use all the resources that we have here. Your Career Path is the program that Katie mentioned up front. I like career advice on Monster. The Muse has great stuff. Attend all these Work It Out sessions. And here's the connecting point for all of them. We're doing one on LinkedIn, interviewing, and alternative job searching, right? Your Career Path is helping people think about their career possibilities. There's great opportunities for entrepreneurs and online resources. So,
excellent. Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. You are like bang on time, and that was a phenomenal session. Yeah, I think some of us in the room here were taking notes, and I was making sure that the staff that's on our team weren't taking too many notes because we don't want their resumes to be too up to date. So just kidding. So thank you so much. So we do have some questions here. Like Mark said, he's doing more, I think it's Mark that will be presenting more of the Work It Out session. So that's part of our MFS Spousal Employment suite of programs. And Mark's team will be taking on all of the sessions from January, February, and March. So there'll be a session each month. So go to the link on the website and you'll be able to register for those. And those are for all military community members, not just for spouses. So we have a question here, Mark. So kind of a long one. I'm finding it hard to find jobs that will allow me to continue growing and further develop my career. I'm often finding myself in for interviews where I feel overqualified. How can you get selected for meaningful and challenging employment opportunities that will allow a military spouse to gain new skills? I would like to feel that I have my own opportunities, my own career aside from being a military spouse. I feel like as soon as I explain I'm a military spouse and that I've moved around every couple of years, this is a negative to an employer. So first of all, this seems like this individual would be an excellent candidate for your career path. So take a look for our winter session, but I'll let Mark, maybe Mark, you can address this. So overqualification, feeling
the overqualified thing, I know it's one of those military spouse questions. It comes up a lot too, and I want to really focus on the skills thing and people have a different perception than employers. So sometimes it's the degree or diploma that makes the employer feel that way. And again, I'm hesitant to ever suggest that you should pull off something that you've worked so hard to get. But I would say, can you bring, I like that modified chronological resume. And if you can bring to the top, let's say relevant administrative skills or experience, or relevant research experience, or relevant IT experience, and then show the jobs and the bullet points that we've talked about and the results that you got, I think you simply put your best foot forward and try and get those skills that the employer wants, rather than the worry that you have about the overqualified. You can bring things further down, like education is one thing that I know that people sometimes think about. But overall, I think the gist of your question, apply through the side door. In other words, build relationships, find organizations of interest, talk to people. More Canadian employers are using employee referrals to find qualified candidates than ever. So don't just rely on the black hole of job search and Indeed and LinkedIn, and then you'll find somebody who's much more willing to hear your story than to just quickly scan your resume in a number of seconds. So, in a short period of time, that's like a few sentences. And if you were my client, we dig into that in more detail.
Yeah, and today's a great time to even start practicing some of that. From 1 to 4 today, you'll have the opportunity as a military spouse to chat virtually with our 12 network employers. And so it could be a great opportunity just to start getting some of this feedback that Mark's talking about to see, to start trying to go in the side door to try to get more of a personal connection with that recruiter, which sometimes can help. So next question. So how do I address a 4-year gap in employment due to postings and family obligations? And that has resulted in no longer having up-to-date professional references. And this, we know from feedback, is an extremely common challenge for military spouses.
Yeah, I mean, so that was the gap that we talked about a few minutes ago there. Can I have you think about what you gained in those 4 years, right? And if you were to put relevant experience, and let's say it even goes back to 2014. So you had a job from, let's say, 2012 to 2014, and that's the first one that the employer sees, okay? And all the bullet points and the results like we talked about in today's webinar. And then below you have a section called additional experience, and you name it, international travel and parenting, from 2014 to present. And then you have one line that just talks a little bit about the wonderful, experiences and skills in professional language, adaptability, flexibility, responsibility, responsible for, cross-cultural communication, gaining familiarity with regions of the country. Right? There are so many things that if you put your thinking cap on, you'd probably come up with 5 or 6 things that you got out of it. And you're still focusing on the skills that the employer wants, but you've not just left this 4-year gap where people don't understand what happened.
Point. So final question, then we're going to transition off because we do have another, we have 2 more questions, sorry. So I have the opposite issue. I've had 3 major careers in 20 years and many separate positions. So I'm never sure if I should include it all or leave it out or make it shorter. But then there are timeline gaps. So I think the question is, should she be including all, do you have a really weighty resume because you have great experience? How do you know how to pare it down?
Yeah, and
I think I could be, Wendy, feel free to type in the chat if we are not answering your question correctly.
Yeah, 20 years. So some of you have longer career history than others. And if that's you, you don't have to go back and say everything over those 20 years. I hesitate to have you take off something, 15 years ago if it's super relevant. So I think relevance is your key question. I don't think there's one specific answer to it, but I certainly have seen people show the last, let's say, 8 or 10 years of experience if you have 20. And hopefully within that you have some relevant experience for the particular employers that you're seeking to connect with. I've also seen this other strategy, right? And maybe the gap in time, like the 10-year to 20-year ago period, I've seen people combine things, right? So there's this thing where you might say, job title 1, comma, job title 2, comma, job title 3 from, 1995 to 2005. And you combine 3 things. And then you could have maybe 3 bullet points that are the highlights of those 3 things, and you save yourself time and space. And if there was one really blockbuster employer that you think is helpful to include because everybody knows them, oh, I work for one of the banks, or I work for one of these IT companies, then you can name drop that company. But it's a way of taking maybe this much stuff in your resume and combining it down a little bit. Again, only if it's relevant. So I think timeline is relevant to think about, as you, Wendy, suggest, but also the relevance of the stuff that goes back, and you can leave some of that out if that helps.
Excellent. So our final question, because we do want to make sure we have time to transition into our next virtual session. So thanks for all the great tips. I was wondering if you have any advice for applying for part-time jobs or gigs. I'm a professional biologist who sidelines as a freelance writer. Wow, that is one great mixed bag of skill sets. And a cartographer. A cartographer. Thank you. Out of necessity of being millennial and military spouse. What are some best practices for grabbing those shorter contracts where there are literally thousands of other freelancers?
Right on. Great. So good for you for being, contemporary with what's going on in the world of work and doing a few things. And, I know there are a lot of freelancers. One estimate I saw in Canada that people on contract and freelance and gig economy, and it's like up to 30% of us, and that number, of course, keeps rising. So I think there's a job search question, Rebecca, in there. And, there are sites like Upwork, and others that are the kind of marketplace for freelance work. And so you might see that, but so is Craigslist and Kijiji. Although buyer beware, there's a big mess of stuff on Craigslist and Kijiji, so watch out for that. So probably going through your network may be the best way to get those opportunities. And that's a job search thing, but on your resume, just to focus in on here, I think if you're aiming for doing gigs that are writer gigs and cartographer gigs, you probably need a different resume than the professional biologist one if you're looking for separate jobs. So I would say at a minimum, Rebecca, you've got 2 resumes there. And think about profile for the position of writer or profile for the position of cartographer, and then having the relevant points there and maybe reorganizing the experiences in your resume to match so that the employer sees very quickly that you wrote this 50-page white paper, or you wrote that book chapter, and give them what they need, because they're going to get confused with the professional biologist resume for the writer gig. So hope that helps. And look forward to connecting with some of you through the Your Career Path program too.
Yeah, and again, guys, if you have any questions, our employment@cfmws.com. If we didn't get to your questions today, feel free to send them there. We are here to help you, and we're working within a limited time frame today, so we will have to cut it off there. Again, thank you so much, Mark. He will be here for 3 sessions after the new year, so please tune in for those. Again, him and his staff are running Your Career Path, which is a virtual career counseling program. And coming up next, actually, we have 3 spouses who have kind of navigated some of these challenges that Mark spoke to, and that some of you were asking questions about. And so at 12 o'clock, you will have to exit this session, go back into the auditorium in the virtual platform, and click on the link for the Lessons from the Field panel. And when you get in there, we're going to have a nurse, a registered nurse who's faced some transitioning issues. We'll have an entrepreneur who went into entrepreneurship later in life. And then we also have someone who has transitioned throughout her career from different employers and been able to maintain a constant career despite frequent relocations. So please join us at 12 o'clock. Don't forget at 1 o'clock that you will have an opportunity to network with employers. We have some of our employers are going to be upwards of 4 recruiters online waiting to chat with you. Some of you may have received a question or an invitation from an employer asking you to join them at a specific time. And that is a tool that they have. If they want to have a virtual interview with you, they can reach out to you and ask you to join at a specific time. So we hope to see you back in 20 minutes. All of these, this recording will be posted and sent out to you. The slides will be sent out both in English and in French, and that will happen tomorrow or Monday. So there will be a little bit of a delay, but you will receive both the recording and the slides of this presentation. So thank you so much. And we will hopefully see all of you back in about 20 minutes.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.